The Hands in the Fog. Chapter 1. The fog came first. It began on a Wednesday morning. Too early, too quiet. Nora stood at the window brushing her teeth when she noticed it rolling in. Not mist, not dew, but something thicker, heavier, the kind of fog that seemed to drag the sky down with it. By the time she zipped up her hoodie and stepped outside, it had already swallowed half the street. She called out to her dog, Jasper, who darted ahead. His leash trailed into the white, disappearing like smoke into the void. "Jasper!" she yelled. No bark, no jingle of his tags, just silence. And the fog. It wasn't normal. Fog didn't move like that, smooth and calculated. It curled at the edges of her vision and seemed to listen. She took one step forward, then another, squinting into the milk-colored air. A shape flickered past. A hand? A coat? She blinked. It was gone. Within 20 minutes, the entire town was cloaked. Street lamps glowed faintly like ghosts behind gauze. Cars crept with hazard lights blinking, their horns muffled to whispers. Everyone said the same thing. It came too fast. By noon, the local weather station had gone off air. Nora's mother pulled the blinds down. "It'll pass," she said, but she didn't sound convinced. She kept rubbing her arms like she was cold from the inside out. That night, the fog stayed, and the next, and the next. People stopped going out, phones stopped working, and Jasper never came back. But what haunted Nora more was what she thought she saw the second night. A silhouette outside her window, arm raised like it wanted to knock, but never did. Because when she flung the window open and stared into the fog, there were only the faintest shapes, like hands reaching through the white. The fog had come first, but it wasn't alone. Chapter 2. A Touch in the Dark. The third night, Nora couldn't sleep. Her room felt colder than usual, the kind of cold that seeped into her skin even under thick blankets. The fog outside was thicker than before, glowing slightly under the moonlight, like a living curtain pressed against the house. She sat on the edge of her bed, listening. The whole town had gone quiet, too quiet. No engines, no owls, not even the wind, just the low, humming stillness of the fog pressing against the world. Her phone buzzed once, then died. The screen went black and wouldn't turn back on. She got up, walked to the hallway and stopped. The house felt altered, not completely different, but unfamiliar in small, sharp ways. The walls felt too close, the shadows darker than they should be. The floor creaked in places it never had before. She turned on the light. Nothing. The bulb stayed dark. She tried the switch in the bathroom, then in the kitchen. No power. And then she felt it. Just the faintest brush, like fingertips against the back of her neck. She spun around, heart in her throat, but there was no one there. Just the dark hallway. Empty. She backed away, hands shaking. "Hello," she whispered. Silence, but not the comforting kind. As she turned back toward her room, she felt it again. A cold, slow touch sliding across her wrist. Not painful, not grabbing, just noticing. As if something was trying to remember her shape. She bolted into her room and slammed the door. The fog outside thickened, as if responding, but she didn't sleep that night. And when she woke in the morning, her wrist had faint marks, not bruises, not scratches, just the outline of fingers, as if something had once held her in the dark and decided to let go. Chapter 3. No one else saw them. By the 5th day, the town was a ghost of itself. Shops stayed shuttered. School had been canceled indefinitely. People whispered to each other in tense voices, all of them watching the fog, waiting for it to leave, but it didn't. Nora tried to act like things were normal. She tried to eat breakfast, read a book, even scroll through her dead phone, but every time she glanced at the window, the fog stared back. She started to notice them more, the hands. At first, just in her peripheral vision. A flicker near the porch, a gloved palm pressed gently against the upstairs glass. But when she ran to look, there was never anything there. Then came the day she saw one fully. She was walking down the driveway to take out the trash, something her mom begged her not to do. "Just wait," she'd said. "We can leave it by the door." But Nora needed to breathe. As she stepped off the porch, the fog seemed to close in around her. The world turned to cotton. Her footsteps sounded wrong, and then, just past the edge of the front yard, she saw it. An arm, pale, delicate, reaching out from the fog like it was searching for something. It hovered in the air, motionless, fingers curled as if beckoning. She froze. "Mom?" she called, but her voice felt like it died in the mist. The hand drifted backward, slow and silent, retreating into the whiteness. She dropped the trash and ran inside. When she told her mom, her mother's face went pale. "Don't go back out there," she said. "Stay away from the fog." That night, Nora called her best friend Jess. "You've seen them too, right? The hands?" Jess was quiet. Then she laughed, unsure. You're stressed. That fog's messing with you." But Nora could tell. Jess didn't believe her. No one did. No one else saw them. Or maybe they just didn't want to. Chapter 4. The Mist Follows Me. It didn't matter where Nora went anymore. The fog followed her, not just outside, but inside, threading itself through her life like a slow-moving shadow. It wasn't just in the streets or clinging to the trees. It seeped into her clothes, her skin, her breath. She'd wake in the morning to find condensation on her bedroom mirror, even though the windows were closed. A damp chill in her sheets, her clothes smelling faintly of mildew. At first, she thought it was in her head, that maybe the fog outside was just influencing how she felt. But it wasn't that. It was following her. At school, what little remained of it, she sat in a half-empty classroom and noticed the fog outside the window pressing closer than before. It clung to the glass like it wanted to get in. When she turned around, no one else seemed to notice. Not the teacher, not her classmates, only her. During gym, she went into the locker room alone. When she opened her locker, a soft mist spilled out, cold and damp, curling at her feet. She backed away, heart pounding. She looked around, but she was alone. It was the same at Jess's house. Nora had gone there hoping for comfort, but when she stepped inside, the temperature dropped instantly. A foggy breath escaped her lips. Jess didn't feel it, didn't see it, but Nora did. The corners of the room blurred, the floor felt soft. The mist was there too. Jess tried to joke, said Nora had brought the fog with her. But Nora couldn't laugh. She knew. The fog wasn't just following her. It had chosen her. And wherever she went, it came too. Chapter 5. Fingerprints on the mirror. Nora woke up before dawn, her bedroom cloaked in bluish darkness. The fog outside pulsed softly with the light of a street lamp she could no longer see. It was quiet, so quiet that even the sound of her breath felt like a violation. She sat up slowly, feeling the weight of exhaustion in her bones. The mirror across her room shimmered faintly in the low light. Something about it felt wrong. She stood, crossed the room barefoot, and stared at her reflection. At first, it looked normal. Her tangled hair, her tired eyes, the pale shape of her hoodie. But then she leaned closer. There were fingerprints, not on her side of the mirror, on the inside. They were small, smudged, pressed against the glass like someone had tried to claw their way out. The patterns looked fresh, deliberate. 5 long, thin streaks trailed downward like melting icicles. Nora recoiled. She wiped the glass with her sleeve. Nothing. The marks remained. She backed away, heart thudding. The fog outside the window thickened, swirling slowly, as if it were thinking. The next morning she checked again. The fingerprints were gone. But when she opened the medicine cabinet, a new message had appeared on the inner glass. "Let me in." She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just stared, heart pounding, her breath frosting the mirror's surface. And for a brief moment, just a flash, her reflection smiled back at her. But she hadn't. Chapter 6. Whispers from the Cold. The wind wasn't blowing, but Nora heard it anyway. Soft whispers threading through the fog like strands of icy breath pressed against her ears. It began that evening as she sat by the fireplace, trying to read, pretending things were normal. Her mother was in the kitchen, silent, stirring soup that neither of them had the appetite to eat. The whispers began faintly, just syllables, shapes without sound, but they grew clearer as the house grew colder. Nora tried to convince herself it was the draft beneath the door, but deep down she knew there was no wind. The fog was whispering. She stepped outside, phone flashlight slicing through the mist. "Who's there?" she called. No answer. But the whispers didn't stop. They seemed to move around her, circling, listening. Then one word became clear. Nora. Her name, spoken softly, like a memory. She turned sharply. "Not." She backed toward the door. The whispers grew faster, layered voices overlapping, some childlike, some ancient, and all cold, so cold it ached inside her bones. Just before she closed the door, she saw a figure in the fog, small, still. It looked like a boy, barefoot, arms by his sides. When she blinked, he was gone. Back inside, her mother asked, "Were you speaking to someone?" Nora shook her head, but her skin told the truth. She could still feel the cold touch of the whispers clinging to her like frost. They knew her name now, and they were getting closer. Chapter 7. The Vanishing Path. It started with the garden path behind her house, a trail of old stones that wound through the backyard into the trees. Nora had walked it 100 times, back when everything was normal. She used to take Jasper there, but after the fog came, she avoided it. One afternoon, the sun tried to shine. A weak beam broke through the clouds. Nora, desperate for clarity, stepped outside. The path looked different, shorter somehow, narrower. She took a deep breath and followed it, her boots crunching softly on the wet leaves. The fog wrapped around her ankles like water. She kept walking. After 20 steps, the trees looked wrong. They bent inward like they were leaning to listen. After 30 steps, she realized something terrifying. She couldn't hear her own footsteps anymore. She turned around. The path was gone. No stones, no trail, no direction. Panic clawed at her throat. She tried retracing her steps. She turned left, then right. Nothing. Just endless white fog and the hushed breath of something watching. "Nora." She spun around. The voice was close, closer than it should have been. It sounded like her mother, then like Jess, then like herself. She ran. Branches scraped her arms. Her breath came in short gasps. A shadow flickered to her left. Too tall to be hers, a hand brushed her shoulder. Then she burst into her backyard. She collapsed to her knees, trembling. Behind her, the fog closed like a curtain. The path did not return. And Nora understood. If you follow the fog too far, it erases your way back. Some paths only lead in and never out. Chapter 8. The Boy in the Fog by Jonathan Hart Hackett. Chapter 8. The Boy in the Fog. Chapter 8. The Boy in the Fog. The Boy in the Fog. The next time Nora saw him, she was wide awake. It was just past midnight. The fog had crept in again, thick as ever, and her room was a breathless cold. She couldn't sleep, not after the whispers, the fingerprints, and the vanishing path. So she sat by the window, wrapped in 2 blankets, watching. At first there was nothing. Then, just like before, a figure took shape. A small figure. It stood still at the edge of the backyard. The fog swirled around it, but didn't touch it, like the mist itself was afraid. Nora leaned forward. The boy was barefoot, his shirt too thin, his hair messy like he'd just woken from a long, dreamless sleep. His face was pale, almost glowing. He turned his head slowly, like he felt her watching. Then he raised his hand, not to wave, to point, straight at her. Nora stepped back from the glass. She didn't want to blink, afraid he'd vanish, but her heart was racing. Her breath fogged the glass. The boy didn't move. She ran downstairs, flung open the back door. The cold slammed into her, but she pushed through it. "Who are you?" she shouted. The fog swallowed her voice. When she reached the spot where he had stood, he was gone. But in the mud, just barely visible, were footprints. Small, bare, fresh, and next to them, another set, larger, leading back into the trees. She hadn't seen him alone. He wasn't lost. He was leading something. Chapter 9. Don't let it hold you. After seeing the boy in the fog, Nora couldn't stop thinking about the second set of footprints. They were larger, adult-sized, and they led deeper into the woods. But more than that, they seemed deliberate, like someone was being led or followed. She tried to ignore it, diving into routines, cleaning, reading, pacing, but everything felt shallow. Her thoughts wandered back to those footsteps and the weight behind them, not just size, but presence. Someone or something was out there. That night, she dreamed of hands, countless, drifting through the fog like dancers, some small like children's, some large wrapped in gloves or bandages. They reached for her, not to grab but to hold, softly, firmly. It wasn't forceful, it was intimate, like the way grief holds on to you when you try to forget. Some of them stroked her hair, one brushed her shoulder, one cupped her cheek as though remembering someone else. She woke with her hands clenched and her body stiff. She could still feel them, those touches that didn't bruise but didn't let go either. At breakfast, her mom tried to smile, but her eyes looked far away. Nora asked if she remembered what day it was. Her mother hesitated, then said, "It's Thursday?" The fog was doing more than haunting. It was affecting people. Stretching time, stealing focus, holding on to thoughts. She started to wonder, was her mom losing time too, forgetting things on purpose? Jess called, said she was scared. Her dad couldn't find the garage that had been behind their house for 10 years. Her little brother had started talking to someone outside the window. And then Jess whispered something that made Nora go cold. It touched me. It didn't hurt, but it won't let go. That afternoon, Nora stood at the edge of the yard, fog curling at her boots. Her breath came out in shallow gasps. She could feel it watching her, waiting. She whispered, "You can't have me." And for a second, just one quiet breath of a moment, she felt something wrap around her wrist. Not to pull, just to hold. It wasn't aggressive. It was familiar, like the hand of a friend who hadn't forgotten her. A memory trying not to disappear. Because the fog didn't always take. Sometimes it simply waited until you gave in. And Nora wasn't ready to let go. Chapter 10. The Day It Took My Voice. Nora had felt the fog creeping closer for days, but she hadn't realized how much it had taken until it took something she didn't think could disappear. It began subtly, a dry throat, a rasp in her words. That morning when she tried to greet her mom, her voice cracked. "Morning," she croaked. But it didn't sound right. It sounded distant, like someone else was speaking for her. Her mother didn't look up from her coffee. The silence felt louder than usual. She tried again. "Mom?" But her mouth moved, and no sound followed. She walked outside, needing air, needing something real, but the moment she stepped off the porch, her breath caught in her throat. She tried to call out. Anything, even just her dog's name, but no sound came out. Her lips moved, her lungs worked, but her voice was gone. She clutched her chest, trying again, willing sound to rise. Nothing, not even a whisper. She backed away, tears burning her eyes, and raced inside. She grabbed a pen and notebook and scribbled, "I can't speak." Her mother read it, blinked, and smiled faintly. "That's all right, sweetie. You're just tired." Her voice sounded wrong, hollow, off-pitch, not hers. Nora wanted to scream, wanted to shake her, but her mother just turned and continued folding laundry, humming a tune that made Nora's skin crawl. It wasn't her mother's song, not a song she'd ever heard before. The fog was inside now, not just the house. Inside her mother, inside Nora. In the mirror, Nora saw something strange. Her mouth moved, but it wasn't her movement. It mouthed words she didn't try to say. Her lips shaped something she couldn't hear, but felt. She ran her fingers down the bathroom mirror. It fogged instantly. She wiped it with her palm. Her reflection didn't match. He smiled. It whispered something she couldn't hear, but the meaning sank into her bones like frostbite. "I have your voice." That night, she dreamed of fog slipping into her throat, of hands tracing her jaw, of her own voice echoing in a forest she had never walked. The fog wasn't outside anymore. It was inside her, and it was learning to speak in her voice, with her memories. Chapter 11, Eyes in the White. Nora stopped walking alone, not because she was afraid of getting lost. She already was, but because of what she began to see in the fog. Not shapes, not shadows. Eyes. It started at school, what was left of it. She was sitting near the window, watching the fog lick at the corners of the glass. Her classmates were dazed, as if sleepwalking through the day. The teacher didn't finish her sentences anymore. Nora turned her head and froze. Two eyes, staring through the window, not human but not animal either, reflective, still, focused directly on her. She blinked, and they vanished. The next night they returned. In the backyard, at the edge of the trees, dozens of them, lined up like lights, watching. They never blinked, never moved, but she could feel them scanning her, like they were searching for something inside her, something familiar. She closed the blinds and locked the door, but it didn't matter. When she closed her eyes, they were still there, in her mind, in her memories. They began appearing elsewhere too, reflected in water puddles, in the turned-off television screen, in the shimmer of her mother's reading glasses. Nora saw them, and no one else did. She tested herself, asked Jess to stand in the kitchen window and look outside with her. "Do you see them?" she asked. Jess squinted, shrugged. "No, just fog." But Nora saw them, all of them. She started drawing them, eyes of all shapes and colors. They filled the margins of her notebook. She didn't remember drawing some of them. And sometimes when she passed a mirror or glanced into her phone's black screen, she didn't see her own eyes anymore. She saw theirs. They were learning her gaze, echoing it back, practicing. At night, when she finally drifted into sleep, she dreamed of walking blindfolded through thick fog and dozens of eyes surrounding her, gently guiding her steps. Some whispered memories she'd forgotten. Some whispered her own thoughts back to her, just slightly wrong. The eyes in the white weren't just watching. They were waiting and remembering everything she had ever tried to forget. Chapter 12. The Bridge That Wasn't There. Nora found the map by accident, buried under a stack of old books in the attic, near a box labeled Town Plans 1943. She hadn't meant to go up there, but something about the fog felt different that morning, lighter, like it wanted her to follow it. She studied the map with shaking fingers. It showed a bridge, a long one, stretching from the end of her street across the river to the old orchard. But Nora had lived there her whole life. There was no bridge. Not now. Not ever. Except that afternoon, she saw it. Drawn by instinct or something deeper, she walked past the limits of her neighborhood where the road crumbled into gravel. And there, through the fog, was a shadow stretching over the river. A bridge. Long, wooden, silent. It looked old but untouched, like it had been waiting. She stepped onto it slowly. Each footfall echoed too loudly, like the bridge remembered sounds more than it produced them. The boards didn't creak. The wind didn't blow. Everything was suspended. The farther she walked, the quieter the world became. No birds, no water, just silence and the soft, steady pulse of her own heartbeat. Midway across, she saw her. A woman, older, back turned, standing at the railing. "Hello?" Nora called. The woman didn't move. Nora stepped closer, heart racing. The figure's coat looked like one she'd seen in a photo album once, her mom at 17. As she reached out, the woman turned. It was her mother, but younger, different. Pale eyes, cold face. Her features were familiar, but her expression was blank, like a memory, not a person. She didn't speak, just reached out her hand. Inviting. Nora stepped back. The bridge groaned. The woman's eyes turned black. Nora ran. She didn't stop until she reached the road. Her chest burned. Her legs ached. She turned back, ready to point, to scream. The bridge was gone. No planks, no shadow, just fog and the slow trickle of water beneath an empty sky. She looked down. Her shoes were wet. The mud clung to her ankles like memory. The bridge wasn't real. But she had walked it, and something on the other side had waited for her. Chapter 13. Something's Learning Me. Nora used to think the fog was mindless, like a force of nature, something strange but accidental. Now, she wasn't so sure. It started with the voice. She heard it again, in the mirror. Not hers, not exactly, but close, like someone was practicing how to sound like her, testing words in her tone. saying phrases she often whispered to herself when no one was around. Then came the movements. She'd catch her reflection blinking before she did, or her hand reaching for a doorknob a split second before she told it to, or a flicker in her peripheral vision, her own silhouette repeating her breath half a beat behind. And then there were the dreams. In one, she stood in the fog, watching someone else wear her face. The figure smiled, practiced her expressions like a mask, and behind it stood more blurry silhouettes with mouths moving silently, mimicking her, not cruel, not violent, just rehearsing. She tried to ignore it, but her notebooks began changing. She'd write something in the morning, only to find it rewritten by evening. Words she hadn't used, thoughts she didn't remember having, but in her handwriting. Nora began keeping a private journal, one she hid in her sock drawer, her real thoughts, the ones she wouldn't say out loud. She checked it every morning. 3 days later, it was gone. In its place was a single page written in her handwriting that read, "Don't worry, I remember it all now." The fog didn't just watch her. It was studying, copying, learning, not just her habits, her soul. She heard her own voice speaking in the backyard one night, softly repeating her thoughts back to her like echoes she hadn't said aloud yet. The next morning, she found her reflection humming a tune she only knew in her head. Each memory, each fear, each moment she tried to protect was being played back like film, edited, rearranged, and claimed. She was being rehearsed, rewritten. Something was learning her, and it wasn't copying her for fun. It was preparing, and she didn't know what it wanted to become. Chapter 14. The grip that remembers. It was no longer enough to stay inside. The fog came anyway. That night, Nora bolted awake to the sound of scratching, not at the door but under her bed. A low, slow drag of something soft, like cloth or skin, scraping the floorboards. She hesitated, heart racing, then slowly leaned down to check. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the blanket. Nothing, just shadows, still air. But the next morning, she noticed the bruises. Not painful, but distinct, finger-shaped, wrapping gently around her ankles like something had held her in place as she slept. They were perfectly spaced, symmetrical, as if placed with care. She wore jeans that day. Didn't tell her mom. Didn't tell Jess. What was the point? No one wanted to see what she saw. Later, she returned to the attic. The map was gone, but in its place, tucked in the box labeled Town Plans, was a black and white photograph. It was a picture of a girl standing in the fog at the edge of the trees. Her face was blurred, but her posture was familiar. The shape of her shoulders, the braid on the left side. It was Nora. She turned it over. One word was scrawled in faded ink: remember. That night the fog pressed against the house. The windows fogged up from the outside. Her breath misted in the hallway like she'd stepped into winter. It happened as she returned from the bathroom. The hallway shifted. It bent unnaturally, as if stretching. The air felt thick, syrupy. She reached for the wall, and something reached back. A hand. pale, familiar. It gripped her wrist, not violently, but possessively, like it knew her, like it had held her before. A cold pulse ran up her arm, and Nora's knees buckled. She gasped, whispering, "Let go." And for a moment the fog answered, not with words, but with memory. Visions flooded her mind, her childhood, her dog Jasper, her laughter with Jess, her mother singing to her as a baby, but also others. Memories she didn't own. A woman on a bridge, a boy in a foggy field, a family standing still inside a house while the world disappeared around them, a scream beneath floorboards, a lullaby whispered in a forgotten tongue. They weren't just fragments, they were alive, breathing, waiting. The hand released her. Nora collapsed, gasping. The fog retreated slowly, like a tide pulling secrets back into the sea. When she woke, she was in her bed. Her ankle bruises were gone, but the memory remained. She remembered now, and the fog did, too, and it was holding on tighter than ever. Chapter 15. Where the fog waits for me. Nora knew it wouldn't let her go until she made a choice. The fog had taken so much, her voice, her certainty, her sense of safety. But it hadn't taken everything. Not yet. And what remained inside her, memories, fear, love, was the only thing she could still offer or protect. She understood now. It didn't want to destroy her. It wanted her to join it, to carry what others had left behind. The house was silent, her mother asleep or pretending to be. The clock had stopped. The lights flickered in rhythm with her heartbeat. Everything inside her said. She walked outside, barefoot. The porch boards creaked gently under her weight. The ground was cold but familiar, the air dense but clear, and the fog, oh, the fog, parted like it had been expecting her. The boy stood at the edge of the woods. This time, he didn't run. He held out his hand. Nora stepped forward. The trees bent around her like they were listening. The sky dissolved into gray. She passed the spot where the path once was, and now it reappeared, stones guiding her just like before. But this time, she wasn't being followed. She was being led. Figures emerged slowly from the fog, hands reaching not to trap, but to guide. Each one carried the weight of memory. Not ghosts, not monsters. People who had been lost and forgotten. People the fog had absorbed. People who still remembered themselves, if only faintly. Some faces she recognized from dreams, others from old photographs, their eyes sharp even in mist. And among them was Jasper. His form shimmered in the mist, tail wagging once before he stepped back into the trees, leading her further in. The fog thickened, then loosened. It breathed. She passed by people whispering memories, snippets of lullabies, prayers, promises, her name spoken in voices she'd never heard before. Some watched her, others simply reached out a hand for her to hold. She understood then. The fog wasn't evil. It was memory, grief, the parts of people no one else could carry. And it had chosen her not to take, but to remember, to be the one who would not forget. She paused at the edge of the white. She could leave. She could turn and go, live a life of distance and fading echoes. But she did. She stepped into the fog, not to vanish, but to remain, because somewhere inside it her voice still lived. And maybe, just maybe, so did the rest of her. She took Jasper's lead and walked further in, the warmth of memory meeting the chill of the mist. The fog wrapped around her, not to consume her, but to hold her. And for the first time in weeks, she didn't feel afraid. She felt remembered,